Rohit Bhargava. Why don't we have a seat? Okay. We'll get started. All right. Comfy?
I'm always comfy, yes.
Okay. So for those of you who do not know Rohit Bhargava, he is a trend curator, and we'll find out more about what that means, who helps brands and leaders win by learning to see what others miss. You have a long list of accolades and 5+ books written. You have your
5+ is exactly 6, so I like to think that 5+.
5+,
it's big, right?
It could be infinite.
Could be infinite.
It could be infinite.
Yeah, it could be 12.
But your signature book, Non-Obvious, has been read or shared by over 1 million readers, features 15 annual trend predictions, and is in this 8th year of publication. So we're going to talk a little bit about what this means and what's next for you. And for those of you who don't know, Rohit had a very long line waiting for him in his session yesterday because it was such a popular session at South by. So we're super excited to have you with us today.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited too. This is a great venue. I wish you guys could see the whole thing. It's really cool.
Awesome. So you describe yourself as a trend curator, and you define a trend as a curated observation of the accelerating present. What does that mean?
Yeah, so we hear a lot about trends, right? And trends can be everything from rose gold, right, as a color, or trends as in like everybody's going to be 3D printing in the future. And so what I try and talk about when it comes to trends is, first of all, a trend isn't a prediction, I believe. A trend is not a prediction of something that might or might not happen. A trend is a prediction that something that's already happening right now is going to accelerate over time. And so that's what I'm trying to predict. Like something that is happening a little bit, like someone launched something, somebody's starting to believe something. And the prediction is, this is going to take off. Like lots of people are going to be influenced by this. And really what I'm trying to talk about when it comes to the research is like, is this going to change the way we think, the way we buy, the way we sell? Like, is it going to have an actual impact? Or is it like fiction, which is fun and entertainment, but not actually changing what we do right now, right?
It's not a fad.
Yeah, and it's not like, it's not having an impact behaviorally, right? So like, for me, that's the biggest thing. Like, is it changing something about what we have to do right now? Or is it like something we should be afraid of 15 years from now? Which is like, maybe terrifying and maybe fun for like a Hunger Games type of movie, but not so much use when it comes to business.
Well, that said, I believe one of your talks is called Trend Predictions Suck. So let's talk a little bit about why your trends don't suck and what makes them different. So can you kind of unpeel that a little bit for us? And
yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about why things really suck, like why they're really bad, because we're surrounded by that stuff. And I don't always call it stuff that sucks. What I call it is stuff that's obvious. And not everything obvious sucks, but it's not that useful, because if someone tells you something you already know, you're kind of like, thanks for the input, but telling me that 2019 is the year that people will use their mobile devices more than they did in 2018 is not really all that insightful, so the question is like, what do we do with that is different? What does non-obvious mean? And I spent a lot of time like trying to figure that out. And to me, like, part of the key is if you read the same stuff over and over, you are in the same bubble where you basically just look at the stuff that is what you agree with, then the only possible reaction you have to somebody who doesn't agree with you is that they must be stupid. And I don't think that's right. I think that we have different inputs and people read different stuff, and the challenge is we don't have a good way of finding that stuff right now, because the algorithm delivers stuff to you, and we don't think about it. Like the stuff you Google for and the stuff I Google for, we get different results for that. And people don't realize that. They just think, oh, you must see the same thing and I must see the same thing, and if you don't understand it the same way I do, then something's wrong with you.
Yeah. So tell us a little more about your process then, and it takes a lot to step outside your bubble, and
yeah, it does.
Some people don't realize they're in a bubble. So what are some of your practices? What are the things you do every day to try to challenge yourself to see the world differently and making sure you're reading and observing things that are outside of your bubble?
Yeah, and it takes a lot, not because it takes a lot of time or because it takes a lot of money. It takes a lot because it takes a lot of intent. Like, you have to choose to do it. So like, one of my favorite things I do is I buy magazines that are clearly not for me. So I'll buy like Teen Vogue magazine, which is for 16-year-old girls.
Teen Vogue.
Teen Vogue magazine, love it. I'll buy Modern Farmer magazine. I'm not a modern farmer. But the reason I do that is because I can step outside of myself, right? For the last 4 years, I've been subscribed to the presidential campaigns for both parties. So I get emails from President Trump, I get emails from the Democratic National Committee, both at the same time, both about usually the same things, and with a slightly different take. Not that many people do that. Like, they pick one side, and that's the problem.
It's fascinating.
Now, this doesn't cost me any money, right? I mean, anybody could subscribe to both emails, but most people don't.
Like you said, it just takes intent.
Yeah.
Some curiosity.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what happens as a result of reading Teen Vogue and Modern Farmer. You have curated, it seems like hundreds of trends by now, mashing up these different sources of information and pulling out some insights that may be non-obvious to others. So, you know, what are some of the trends that you're finding are most popular this year? And I have a couple favorites of my own, but what's on the top of your list?
When I write, it's sort of like launching like lots of little things that are kind of like little kids, right, little babies, and so you have like as an author, like you have a passion for each one a little bit, but then you start to like see them out in the world, and you're like, you know, this one's more popular. Like, people like this one more, and why is that? And so that's what I start to observe. And so now here we are in March, the new trend report, and every year there's 15 trends. So if you do the math, 15 trends, 9 years, it is more than 100. So you're right. There's a lot of trends. And this year, some of the ones that have really been gaining traction. One of them is what we called muddled masculinity.
Muddled masculinity.
Muddled masculinity, yeah. And it was all about how masculinity has sort of become a question mark now. Like, we don't, as men, like, we don't exactly know what we're supposed to do. And I had this slide, it was actually really great yesterday because it was International Women's Day. And so I went out and I started looking at all the stories about International Women's Day, and there were two stories in particular that caught my attention, two headlines. One headline said, for International Women's Day, women need men to step up, right? And the other one said, men need to just shut up. And that's what we're seeing as men out there, like this message that says, shut up, but lean in also and like help out and do, be a good person, like be a good man. And people don't exactly understand what that means, and we're still making it challenging. I mean, I'm a dad of 2 boys, right? And this whole movement, it was a fascinating point made by Sarah Rich in an article for The Atlantic, where she said there's been this whole push, there was this huge push to allow girls to join the Boy Scouts. And at the same time that was happening, there was no push to allow boys to join the Girl Scouts. Would a boy even want to? Would he be made fun of for doing that? Like, where is the opportunity for the boys who might want to do the things that the Girl Scouts do to do that? There isn't. And when we have a one-dimensional push for equality, it doesn't work. It's not gonna raise the sorts of children and the sort of culture that we want. And I think that's what we're dealing with right now. And so sometimes a trend doesn't really say this is exactly what's happening. The trend is the question mark.
And I'm curious, did your trend come out before or after the Gillette commercial?
Before.
So you,
yeah.
So again, you recognized that there was an undercurrent or something was already happening, and it was going to accelerate. And I think you saw it as a response to that commercial.
Exactly. I mean, it happens a lot, because what you're really reading, and I could look at that and I could tell you, I could predict anything, like how awesome am I, right? But actually what we're doing is reading the signals. And when you read the signals properly, it's not a surprise that something from Gillette comes out. It's not a surprise that other things come along that relate to the trend, because you're predicting something that's already happening, right? You're observing it.
Let's keep going with this example. How do you take action based on that trend? What's actionable from the muddled masculinity trend? How should people react or respond to that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of, I mean, with that trend in particular, right? When you start to think about, okay, well, what does this mean in reality, right? What's actionable about it? Perfect example, when employees have children, do you give the men the same amount of time off as the women? Are they equal parents? Just because they didn't give birth to the kid, does that mean they should have less parental leave or less time to bond with this new baby, right? And like, these are the sorts of things that are like real life things that we're talking about right now and starting to deal with. And so like this is where it starts to become real. And a big part of what we do when we talk about these trends is we say, well, what does it mean for how we need to change the policies that we have, the way that we look at the world, and how we're in the world, what we need to do. Like, for example, I mean, I thought when I was doing a lot of research around this muddled masculinity, just to stick on that for like a little bit more time, I thought about like as a dad of 2 boys, when they get hurt, right? Am I making it okay for them to like be hurt, or am I telling them to suck it up and get over it and be like, you know, you hurt your knee, you have another one, like it's all good, right? And so it forces you to think about that. Like, if I had a daughter, would I treat her the same way, right? What's the right way to do that? It's not something I have the answer to. I'm just saying, like, I started thinking.
It's people to think differently.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Let's take another trend. Maybe I'll pick one this time.
Please do, yeah.
There was a trend in your latest book around retro trust. And the summary is often unsure of whom to trust. Consumers look back to organizations and experiences with brands that have a legacy, or those with which they have a personal history. Talk about what retro trust mean, and what was the inspiration and some of the observations that led you to this insight.
I think retro trust is one that we saw examples of all over the place, very physically. I mean, people were wearing t-shirts of Zelda from 30 years ago, right? Because that's their identity, like that's what they saw. People started listening to vinyl music, right? And that came back. Kodak is launching film again for some discerning photographers who want to actually use like film as opposed to digital photography. And so like there's all these examples where in some cases we're turning back the clock. I mean, there's a great example this weekend of Captain Marvel, right? Yeah. That movie just opened and it's all about the 90s, and the website for Captain Marvel is like one of those ugly blue hyperlink style 1990s websites that I remember coding myself when I was reading that How to Code HTML in a Week book and teaching myself how to do it, you know, and putting in all the tags. Like that's what they were turning back the clock to.
One of the examples was here on stage. Tyler Bushnell, you wrote about in this section, with Polycade and bringing back a modern arcade.
I know, we have one downstairs, right? It's great, yeah, it's great. Because people want that sort of experience. Like there's something powerful about being able to go back to that. Yeah. And I think that sometimes we're doing it because we're just overly stimulated by all of this other stuff. And so like sometimes people, they want the physical book because the physical book doesn't have all this digital stuff or digital interruptions. Like we're going back to that like physicalness. Yeah,
it's funny, there were a couple other trends that kind of hit on this point: deliberate downgrading and extreme uncluttering. You know, in this age we have so many people who are working on bringing new technology to market. It almost seems like there are trends to kind of simplify life and unclutter and...
Yeah, I mean, deliberate downgrading was a great one. I mean, we were joking a little bit earlier about Modern Farmer magazine, but actually there was a story from Modern Farmer that made it into that trend. So this is like how it relates, right? So there was a story about farmers who had these John Deere tractors, and they had the newest tractor, which has all this awesome technology built into it with like weather tracking data and GPS and, you know, helping them figure out all the things that they have to figure out. But when the software doesn't work, they have to wait a couple of days for a software engineer to come and fix it. Whereas the old tractor that they had for a long time, they can fix themselves. And this is not necessarily something that's brand new now, but they would switch back to the old tractor. So they'd return the new one and get the old one. They downgrade to the earlier tractor because it worked better. And if you think about like your own life, like how long did most of us, and maybe slightly older of us, use Windows 95 past 1995, right? I mean, how long was that the Windows? Because we didn't want to upgrade to Clippy and all the other stuff because...
I won't even let my iPhone auto-update. Like I have at least 3 months before I trust it.
Exactly, like we want the earlier version because we trust the earlier version. So the challenge there is the newer version in a lot of cases is better, quantifiably better. And so we have to deal with the skepticism that people have towards it. And another one of the trends was about robots. It was robot renaissance, right? And the interesting thing about robot renaissance is like we have all this technology we can create where we have robots that can do everything like deliver the toothbrush to you in the hotel. If you forget your toothbrush, they had this whole pilot where they put the robot into the hotel and it could deliver the toothbrush, and it failed. And the reason it failed is because when that robot had the toothbrush and it got in the elevator with the human freaked out. And that's the problem, right? Like, we don't know how to react to this stuff. We freak out. And when we freak out, then innovation slows down. And it's not because they can't create the technology. It's because we don't know how to deal with it as people.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Well, I could go on and on about some of the trends, but maybe we turn our attention to how other people can learn to become trend curators, right? I think you have a belief that we need more non-obvious thinkers in the world. Do you think that other people can learn to predict trends in the way that you do? And if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, not only do I think that, I've seen it. I mean, I've seen people when we go out and do like talks and workshops and trainings and things that we're doing all the time. And with students, when I'm teaching, there's a light bulb that goes off for people. And the light bulb that goes off is, I mean, one of the best moments I can explain when the light bulb went off is one of my students was helping her grandma fix her computer. Because everybody knows grandkids are tech support, right?
Yes.
And so grandma called, they were fixing her computer, and she looked at grandma's Facebook and all the stories that she was getting. And she was like, this is an alternate universe. Like, what she's seeing on Facebook, not because she's choosing to, right? Facebook is delivering it based on the algorithm. But the stories she gets and the point of view she gets of the world are very different than what a 20-something-year-old is getting in their Facebook, if they're even looking at Facebook, right? And so that moment for her demonstrated that there's this alternate media universe that she never knew about. And when you realize there's an alternate media universe, all of a sudden it becomes possible that someone could believe something that you think is completely idiotic, right? So, for example, like there's all this talk about, not to get too political, but there's all this talk about climate change, right? And everybody's like, there's climate science, and then there's all these people who are like, how stupid do you have to be to not understand climate science? I mean, there's icebergs that are freaking melting, right? This is a big deal. We see all these signs. But then when you start to look at like some people who who look at that, if you think that it's possible some people might believe that we as humans are so small on Earth that like we could never possibly have an impact on Earth, right? If that's your belief, that humans are so insignificant, we're like ants, right? How much could ants impact anything? I don't know. So if you understand that point of view, all of a sudden this climate thing, you may not agree with somebody, but at least it becomes possible that someone could think that that's climate science isn't real because they believe that we can't possibly have any impact on the Earth, right? So I try and do this a lot in my head. I try and say, like, why would someone who doesn't think the way I do, how can they think that? Like, what would allow them to disagree with me and still have some intelligence? Like, what situation would that involve in order for them to think that?
It's almost like you're building this, keen sense of empathy for all kinds of other people, thinkers, possibilities. Whether you agree or disagree is a separate issue from at least trying to seek the alternative information that's out there.
Yeah, and look, I'm not, I'm not the moron justifier, right? Like, I'm not the person who's gonna tell you that like you can be stupid and be justified in being stupid and not listen to other points of view. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do.
Right.
What I'm trying to do is at least have enough empathy to deal with someone from a position that doesn't involve me dismissing them, right? And that is a big, big problem right now. Like, there's all of these family conversations at Thanksgiving where we're like, oh, we don't talk to these people anymore. Why? Because we can't even converse with them.
Right.
So the solution that so many people have is like, we just don't talk anymore.
Right.
Which is not a good solution.
Not a good solution.
No.
So we talk about being empathetic. Let's talk about being humble. I noticed in your last book that you reflected on your past trends and you graded yourself on how well you did.
I do that every year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And some seems like you scored well, and some maybe you didn't come out the way you thought they would. Why did you think that was important to do? Why do you look back at the old trends and grade them? And what happens to those old trends? And what can you take away from the reflections that you've done?
It's a little bit of behavioral psychology, right? I mean, if you see something where someone says to you proactively, this is not the best. It's not the best that I could have done. It's okay, but I can do better than that. When they proactively tell you something like that, you're like, wow, this person's more trustworthy because they're at least telling me the truth, right? Imagine two situations. You go to dinner and you ask the waiter, what's really good here? Waiter number one says, everything's great. You can't go wrong.
Don't trust them.
Right? Exactly. Like nobody trusts that waiter, right? Because that's useless. The waiter that says, you know, everything's good, but this one dish, people always return it, and this one, you won't get enough food. Like it's too small. It might look good on the plate, but it's not enough food. That waiter, give me that waiter every day, right? And that's what we're trying to do with these trends. Like we're trying to be like that waiter, like the one that tells you, look, everything we ever came up with over these 100 trends hasn't been awesome. That's the truth. But when it's awesome, it's really awesome. And those ones are really worth paying attention to. And you know what? If you get 1 or 2 great ideas from a book, I personally believe like that's enough. I mean, 1 or 2 great ideas can change the course of your career. It can change the course of everything. And so I tell people a lot, and this is a weird thing to say as an author, right? But I tell people a lot, you don't have to finish every book you start. Especially a business book. It's not like a mystery, like where you have to find out who did it at the end, right? Like a business book is not like that. If you read the first 3 chapters and you get a lot of value, and then you're like, look, I'm off to vacation or something else, and I don't have time to read the rest, like free yourself of that guilt.
Okay.
This is not a class where you have to do it. Like your time is too valuable.
Yeah.
So read what you need to read. If you love it, then keep reading. And if it's one of my books, read it all the way, obviously, right?
Totally.
Yeah. But you know, anyone else's or anything else, like you know, value your time is the most important thing. Like, I believe in reading. I believe in books. You should definitely buy the books and support the authors because, like, that's a valuable thing to do. But then value your time, too. You don't have to read cover to cover.
Well, everyone here will have access to your book downstairs, so they'll read it front to back, I'm sure. Maybe we talk about what's next. So when you think about what's next for the non-obvious series, what do you see ahead?
Yeah, we're doing something pretty unique next year. So for the last 9 years, we've been doing an annual trend report with 15 new trends. And so the next year is going to be year number 10, which is an anniversary year of sorts. And it's also 2020, which is kind of a big moment in history for us because it's a nice round number. So next year's book is not going to be Non-Obvious 2020. It's going to be Non-Obvious Megatrends.
Awesome.
And the reason why it's Non-Obvious Megatrends is we're going to look backwards over the last 10 years and look at the biggest themes that have come out across multiple trends and aggregate them together and point forwards towards the world. And essentially say, this is what's going to be happening that's going to be most important over the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. Which is a different lens than we've done in the past. So we'll still have annual updates. They might take a different format after that. But the idea is let's look backwards and then let's look forwards in the next version of the book. So that's what's going to come out in December of this year. So we're in production right now.
Amazing. I'll look forward to it.
Never stops.
It never stops.
It never stops.
I will open it up to questions if anyone has questions, but maybe before that question, you could kind of give us your observations so far about South by Southwest. It would seem that this is a bit of a petri dish of interesting things happening. And in fact, you gave me this card earlier. You've already curated many of the talks that are here and aligned them with the different trends in your book, which is cool. We'll also pass this around. What are you observing here so far? What's been interesting? You know, what's validating some of the trends you see out there? Obviously, some of the topics. Anything challenging the trends, or are you getting insights on new trends, perhaps?
Always insights on new trends, yes, for sure. Excuse me. There's a bunch of themes. I mean, one of the themes is this idea of like what to trust, who to trust. Lies are all around us. Fake everything is all around us. You know, what do we do with that? There's always a consistent theme around like technology and human interaction. So like artificial intelligence, how do we interact with it? How much should we give to them? You know, what's the relationship between these two things? There's always kind of big themes like that. I don't know that it's a big source of research for me right now. But we're in research phase, so I'm just collecting a lot of it.
There's a lot to collect here, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's why I love it. It's great. Yeah.
All right, questions?
Should I stand up?
Sure.
Hey, you have a great name. My name's Rohit. So.
Oh, nice. Awesome. We'll get the fist bump handshake later.
Of course. So this is my unbiased question too. So you talk about kind of looking at both sides of the spectrum, right? You're looking at Team Vogue, you're looking at American Farmer, you're looking at conservative media points, and Democratic, liberal ones too. Well, I think I do something of the same thing, right? I've shared stories about how I watch ESPN, and I watch them for the commercials, and I watch women's entertainment just for the same thing, because I can draw extremely hilarious correlations across both of the spectrums about who they're pitching, right? So my question to you is, how do you effectively lever that information to then profit or even just monetize, right? Like, how do you take these non-obvious trends and how do you put them to work for you, right? How do you monetize?
Yeah, how do you, so in my case, I have something that probably is a little unique, which is I have a definitive ending point, which is this book. So for me, I'm collecting the stories, yes, for the book, because I know there's a product that's coming out at the end of it, but it's also every week I'm publishing an email newsletter, and the idea of the newsletter is to talk about the most interesting stories of that particular week. And so for me, having those endpoints gives me a reason to continually curate this and monetize it in a way. Now, am I charging people to read this email? No. But if I continually provide value every week and every Thursday morning, this email's always there, and I always have this touch point with all of these readers, and the readers are expanding over time, it monetizes itself. Because those people come back to me and say, hey, can you come and do a workshop for us? We need you to come and talk at our next event. We want to pick your brain. Like, all of those things start to happen because of that continual touch point. So in the business that I'm in, which is a services / thought leadership business, it works. But also on a publishing side, I mean, I own a publishing company, and there's a tangible product, right? You're trying to sell books. And this sells the tangible product too, because people see a taste of it, and they're like, oh, I'm going to spend $10 and get the book, or $12 or whatever it is. And so it sells the product too.
All right, so
you got cut off.
I got it, there we go. All right, so to kind of, I guess, add to that, or I guess piggyback off of that concept. So you're talking about having this like very detailed insight into society, having this special kind of market intelligence, right? How can an observer, somebody similar to how you approach it, how can I leverage my business? How can I leverage my business and my business, right? So how can I effectively monetize the same type of sentiment or philosophical approach to the market that you were doing, but how can I do it?
So I know we're running short on time, so let me try to restate it quickly and maybe get at least a taste of the answer.
Okay.
I think you're asking is, how do you as an entrepreneur take the insights from these trends and turn it into action?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways. One is it may turn you on to a new audience. It may turn you on to like a new group or a new way of presenting whatever it is that you have. The other is that a lot of times the trends provide a spark that allows you to brainstorm new opportunities, new product lines, new ways of promoting whatever it is that you're doing. And that's what a lot of times we end up using the trends for. It's not like, okay, you're going to start a muddled masculinity business. I don't even know what that would be, right? But if you knew, for example, that there was this question mark where men don't exactly know what to think or how to behave, that might change the way that you market something. It might change the way that you actually put a product together. And so that's the point.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on stage today. Everyone is welcome to join us downstairs now, and we have Rohit signing books for you all to take with you, and I hope you get as much inspiration and insights out of the book as we have. Thank you again.
Thank you.
World down.